So, from the IT side, and how do you deliver? I was thinking what would hopefully be valuable for everybody in the room, but it's how do you make this happen? Obviously, we've got tons of data, and we've got the data's staggering from all aspects. And how do you deliver this at scale and make an impact in an organization and certainly on health? So, again, I introduced myself earlier, so I work for Red Hat and in the healthcare space. I wanted to put some logos up. This is always helpful to give you an idea of where we play. This is just a sampling. We're in 90% plus of the Fortune 500. We are in about 70% of the provider organizations in the U.S. We're in all the major payer organizations, and I believe all the major pharma and life sciences organizations as well. So again, that's just really just to give an idea of why we are in this space and what we're doing. When we're talking about AI and ML projects, this is just something that I see as a progression. And again, across payer, provider, pharma, life sciences, the commonalities I wanted to highlight here. Usually somebody, early on will think about, wouldn't it be great if we could bring in artificial intelligence and machine learning to do X? That's where the ideas get generated. And it could certainly be on the clinical side, but you can't also forget the administrative side, things like intelligence in the supply chain, the financial side, intelligence in the billing, collection, revenue cycle, whatever you want to call it. And certainly as we move into value-based care across all of healthcare, we're going to see more and more of this, right? But it usually starts out that somebody's got an idea of something to do. So they'll put it together and share it with their friends. You've then got to integrate it into a workflow. So this really cool thing that we put together, how do we add value into our existing workflows? And again, anything from clinical delivery to administrative to financial, all across the organization. How do we make this work with what we've got? Then people start thinking, and by the way, these are just movie scenes that I thought would illustrate the point. How do we expand the capacity? Now that we've got it integrated probably into one workflow at some level, now we've found some kind of value. How do we make this bigger? So how do we bring in development? How do we address security? And how do we deliver this operationally? In the IT world, we call that DevSecOps. But how do we have something that gets everybody together and doesn't become a giant cat herd going forward? Because we've got to govern it, we've got to deliver it. And then we get to data. So a lot of folks in the healthcare world, they'll go down the path with different kinds of data sets. And as we all probably know, the ugliness of healthcare data it's just tremendous. Everything from, again, clinical, financial, administrative, imaging data, scientific data. I think in the pharma world, typically you're trying to pull patient data out of medical records, and what a disaster that is. I work with a lot of payers as well, and the payers want information out of the medical record, and it's funny, I'll ask them, okay, you're probably getting lab data, right? And they're like, yeah, we get that from our providers that are under contract. I said, do you do anything with it? I have yet to find anybody who's doing anything with it, because they get the data and they're like, what on earth is this? So again, to feed AI, if you don't got data, you don't got nothing. So you've got to get the data to a point, make it usable, make it understandable before you can start doing anything with it, right? So unfortunately, I think a lot of folks don't realize the shape the data is in when they embark on these projects. And so at some point they'll pull back and go, wait, we've got to stop everything and work on data. So then how are you going to deploy this, as you go forward? And this is the Clumps movie. If you guys have seen this, Eddie Murphy plays all the roles. Similarly, your software is going to have to live. You're probably going to do it on premise. It might have got developed on a PC or a very local deployment. And eventually people realize we can't build a data center that will do this. We're going to have to use the cloud. And we're going to have it scale at a level that it can just do the processing that we need. And again, people realize this oftentimes too far down, and they have to back up and redo what they've done. Adding in automation, and that's kind of obviously a catch-all word, but there are a lot of processes that you're going to have to either have people do it or you're going to have to automate it in the IT world. So the more automation you have, obviously the better. When you start trying to deliver on AI, if you haven't addressed automation, you're going to need to, because you won't be able to hire enough people to keep the lights on. And then at the end, how do you monetize this? How do you address it on an ongoing basis? You're going to want to change your machine learning models. You're going to want to redeploy them, redeliver them. What does that process look like? What does the life cycle look like? If you need an immediate stop, does that mean you have to take everything down? Hopefully not. You should have a process in place to manage this. And then if you want to monetize it, whether that's through an internal return on investment, justifying itself because this is going to get expensive, or you might want to take these models out to the market and sell them. There's a huge market, obviously, for that, and it's just growing every day. I work with a lot of, again, payer and provider organizations, and even in the pharma life sciences world, where, I keep stressing you need to anticipate you're going to be buying intellectual property of machine learning at some point, or you might be selling it, or you might be doing both. You're not going to have one AI/ML system. You'll probably plan to have about 100, if not 1,000, because all of the centers of excellence for care, for healthcare delivery around the world are going to want to implement this. So how does that happen? What does that look like? So this is kind of the progress that we've seen when people start moving into this world. So what if we flip this on its head? What if we thought about from the very top, from the first, how are we going to support this and how are we going to monetize it? What does that need to look like? How do we, somehow they all wound up ones. How do we automate these deployments across the edge? Let's say you're going to deliver it at the edge, and the edge in IT means, local devices, it means home-based devices. As we move out, the edge is outside of healthcare, it's these kind of devices and localized stuff. In healthcare, we've been doing edge for a long time. We haven't talked about it, and we haven't oftentimes put in IT software support, but this is what's happening with home-based care is the easiest example. But how do we automate this so that we can manage it up front? Think about that first. How do we make data available and usable? Again, having a data platform, there's no substitute for that. Where you're pulling in data, you're streaming it in, you're making it perhaps event-driven based on what it is you're trying to do so that you know instantly what's happening in the data. You don't have to bring it to a data warehouse and then try to extract it, and it's 90 days later you found out there was some event that happened that you wanted to know about. So how do we bring it in? How do we normalize it? If you want to add NLP or FHIR in the current the latest iteration of healthcare integration, how do we do that? Think about that first, or earlier on. How are we going to support our developers? And again, there is so much out there software-wise that people can grab onto. What you don't want to do is have one guy building over here on this and someone else building over here on that. They're using different tools, and then all of a sudden, you have something that's not supportable. So think about how the software gets developed and secured and operationalized, typically in a platform concept, and you give them the tools that you've already vetted, you've included it in what you want, You've got to put some guardrails or it gets out of control literally overnight. How do we layer this into existing workloads? So look at your existing world, whatever that universe looks like, and think, how am I going to make that happen? What needs to happen in those current systems that are operational? How do I deliver this and fold it in seamlessly? Because that's what's going to make a difference in your work stream. And then, when I've got this in place, let's talk about a lot of things that are really cool and drive value. So kind of turn that paradigm on its head and you'll avoid a lot of U-turns and cul-de-sacs and walking off a pier and all of those things that people wish they knew up front. I think from an AI/ML standpoint, it's incumbent probably on all of us to think through, let's see where we want to be and work our way into it, right? Okay, here comes the commercial, Red Hat's perspective. We do a lot in this area. I asked before if anybody was using Red Hat, and nobody raised their hand, so I'm assuming this isn't a real IT level audience. Oh, but maybe I'm wrong? Okay. So we sell basically three, and this doesn't need to be a commercial. There are three platform areas that you should think about. One is the very foundational pillars of the infrastructure, and you want something that's going to support moving to the cloud. You don't want to have to change your foundational infrastructure if you're moving to the cloud, if you're moving to the edge, whatever you're doing, try not to change that stuff. Buy stuff that's modern, put it in place, think about it ahead of time, because of course you can't build a building and swap out the foundation very easily, right? I mentioned the developers and the data and being able to pull all of that together and then share it across whatever deployment you want. That's a newer approach, and there's not a lot of stuff out there that'll do that. If you tie on to one vendor, you need to know what your options are. If you tie on to one cloud, how can I get to the others? If you want to monetize this, it better work everywhere, right? So you need a ubiquitous, agnostic approach as much as you possibly can. And then the automation part. How can I have something, the less automation tools, the better. There's a lot of them out there, and a lot of them are very good at what they do. How do I govern that? How do I make sure it's secure, it's doing what I need it to do from all angles, and it's involving as few people as possible? So, I won't get into all of the text in the black here. You'll have access to that. But there's a lot of IT considerations that make everything we're talking about at this conference usable or not, or locked up. So, those are just always, hopefully, heads up as you move into this. I did want to put this up. I think it's appropriate to the audience. That one development platform I was talking about and data platform, this is part of what we do. I mentioned there's a lot of software tools that are available, obviously, in the AI world. We've got a lot here, et cetera. We deliver an AI/ML platform for development, and its basis is Red Hat OpenShift, but all of this is open source software components that come out of upstream communities. If you're familiar with the open source world and how that works, there's software contributors. It's basically free software, but we pull these together, components that we know people are going to want to use for AI and ML development. And then we enable many other tool sets that you might want to choose and pick. So this is how we're a platform for managing artificial intelligence and machine learning. Again, the life cycle, the operationalizing it. This is what we do. It's around a lot of the tools that you'll see here and that kind of thing. Just a few examples here in the minutes we have. Boston Children's Hospital. This is from about 2018. They started, if you're familiar with the Massachusetts Open Cloud, Let's say you're in Western Massachusetts and your child fractures his ankle. And so you take him to the emergency room, they do an x-ray, and they go, ooh, that's, you might want to take him to Boston Children's. The x-ray image across the state gets uploaded to the Massachusetts Open Cloud. And the physicians at Boston Children's, for example, they can pull those images down, and there's artificial intelligence that they've built on, our platform that can help them read the images and highlight areas that they should look at, et cetera. So this has been running for several years now and has been very, very valuable to the organization. HCA, if you guys are familiar with HCA, they're a for-profit healthcare company. They have about 185 hospitals based out of Nashville. They had addressed their data platform issues years ago. And so they had data feeds coming from all of their clinical systems. And they pulled those together, and very rapidly they were able to develop and deploy a sepsis prediction model. So they can now, as the data feeds are coming in real time, their analytics, their AI engine is running in the background and watching the data feeds and picking out who looks like they're lapsing into sepsis. And they have alerts and triggers so that the teams at the hospitals can immediately address that. And this example is from 2019, but it had been live about 7 months, and they were saying it helped, they were crediting it with saving over 8,000 lives. So there's a lot of folks in the provider world especially trying to detect sepsis. And this was just a huge success for these guys. This is one that I can't use their name, but they're a really big hospital system that's payer, provider, all combination. And they're moving into delivering use cases, as you can see on the left-hand side, using artificial intelligence, platforming it to take their data and address all of these supports, and of course prescribing support pops out there. But they're taking a single platform, a common tool set, a data set, and starting from there. So they're doing a very good job right out of the chute with it. And one more I thought I'd toss in, Boehringer Ingelheim, which there might be somebody. Is anybody in the room from Boehringer? Oh, okay, great. Well, thank you for the business. But you guys are doing you've platformed as kind of what I mentioned. You've put this platform in place, and you're moving into machine learning on it. Oh, good, wonderful. So, and I think that's time for questions. Any questions?